Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Gemma, and today we'll be chatting with director Stephen Bradley about his fabulous football feature film Fran the Man. First, have a listen to the trailer here.
Are you single, Fran?
Depends which one of you is asking.
We know what a manager does, Fran, but what exactly does an assistant manager do?
What don't I do is probably an easier question to answer.
The butcher sliced it!
What's the story of the camera crew?
They're making a movie about me.
A reboot of the 40-year-old version, is it?
Can you bring us back to the first time you met Fran Costello?
We've had a tip-off from Interpol.
They're a team from Cyprus, aren't they?
We need recruits. Shake things up a bit.
Who wants to join St. Peter's?
I'm not allowed to join a team.
Says who?
Me ma.
Fran Costello, assistant manager, St. Peter's Celtic.
Jackie Charlton.
Oh, that's mad.
I'm very fond of Fran.
Would you say he's like a son to you?
Oh, God, no.
Whole day is a closed session.
More like a weird nephew.
You heard me, Don. Get out me pitch.
Match fixing is a sophisticated crime. There's a local element, but a huge international component too.
Mafia. The Cosa Nostra. They're all over this.
I throw the club a few grand a year, and then when it comes to the players booking their dirty weekends, they all come to Tipna.
Bottom line is there are rotten apples in your team, Fran.
The detectives were adamant that all the main suspects had to play.
What am I doing up there?
You're the suspect, I know.
Now slip him in, Wheelo! Slip him in!
Why don't we rip up these contracts and Bobby sign for St. Peter's?
Yes.
That's been Irish homework. Oh, bollocks.
How long would it take for someone to realise you were missing if you suddenly disappeared?
Only 2 to 3 days.
Thank you so much for chatting with us.
You're very welcome. Great to see you, Gemma.
Fran the Man is so lovely. It is a joy. That is fun and it's light and it captures like a real warmth and the warmth of community and that niceness of character. So it's really enjoyable. And I was wondering if you could tell us about how you got started in film.
A roundabout way, like so many other people. I actually did a law degree at Trinity, and I spent my whole time in Trinity acting in players because all I wanted to do was be an actor. And after that, I went on a theatre tour to America for 6 months with a bunch of other university actors who were thinking about becoming professional actors. And that completely cured me. Not only did I realize that I wasn't a great actor, I also just realized I wasn't cut out for the life of theatre and being on the road and all of that. So I came back to Dublin and there was pretty much one media lawyer. This really dates me now. We're talking in the 80s, end of the 80s. There was one media lawyer called James Hickey, and I persuaded him to take me on.
Well, yeah.
James, who, yes, was chief executive later of Screen Ireland. And James was working on the legal side of putting together the finance for a little film called My Left Foot. So I jumped out of the legal office onto the production of My Left Foot, which wasn't a bad film to start on. And that's how I got started. But at that time, there was very little being made in Ireland. I think My Left Foot was the only film made that year. I don't think there was a film made the following year. And then The Field was made by Jim Sheridan in '89.
Being involved in that world, when did you kind of realize, okay, I want to direct, I want to create?
Well, it went through a few stages because there was so little film work here. I went to London for a while. And then Jim Sheridan and Noel Pearson, the producer of My Left Foot, had this huge success with the Oscars on My Left Foot and The Field. And they needed a sort of development person to work with them because they had a deal with Universal. So I came back to Dublin and worked with them for a year, during which time I had started having discussions with Ed Guiney, who had been at college with me, and we talked about setting up a production company. So in 1992, we set up Temple Films, and we had Temple Films for the whole of the 90s. And I think we made 6 films during that time. That was just when the film board, as it was then, was restarted by Michael D. Higgins. And it meant that there was, for the few of us filmmakers around, there was actually money there to make films, so we did.
It's such a different ecosystem. I remember going through, what films were made in this year, and there was so little Indigenous. Like, I know there's big American productions kind of happening here in the studios, but there wasn't. That's so exciting. And what was it like on the ground? Was there an air of, we're lucky to be doing what we're doing, or that you're creating
I suppose we were so young. I mean, we were in our early mid-20s, and we were so young that we just had that kind of naivety that this is what was meant to be happening. And, you know, Rob Walpole and Paddy Brannock had Treasure Films at that time, and there was Kling Films, a company that Damien O'Donnell and others had. So there was kind of a rise of a few companies at the same time, and we were all scattered around the old Windmill Lane down by the Liffey. And we just had a lot of fun. And as I say, we got to make things, which was amazing. And we really learned sort of on the job.
Even things like festivals and traveling abroad with your work. What was Irish film back then?
There wasn't much of it, and there was a very small group of us, and we were all in those days, again dates me, we were all shooting on film. So you'd go to a festival with 5 cans of film and you'd put them in the overhead on the Aer Lingus plane and whatever. And the festivals were, again, we were really learning about festivals. And I remember my first film, Reaper, which was a short film in black and white, got rejected by festivals for about 6 months, and then a message came through from the Venice Film Festival that had been selected for competition there, and then it kind of took off. But the festival stories, I mean, there's funny festival stories. Reaper played with an Orson Welles documentary, I think, in Venice, in front of an audience of 1,000 people, and they played it with no sound. So that was pretty mortifying as a start off for your film career. They obviously played it again on another venue with the sound, but it taught us always to bring a bottle of Irish whiskey to a festival and give it to the projectionist.
Oh my God, the stress of that. And in terms of then, like, again, kind of creating your own work and the stories that you wanted to tell, and tell me the evolution of that and in making films and, you know, getting to create work.
So that really goes to my relationship with Ed Guiney at that time and the production company we had, because Ed always knew that he wanted to be a producer, and he always knew that he wanted to do what he's done with Element, which is to form this incredible company that has many layers to it. And we both sort of started off producing, but I knew that I wanted to go towards writing and directing. So Ed produced my first feature, Sweetie Barrett, in 1998, and I had written that over 2 or 3 years, as you do. And you know, it became clear then that I wanted to branch off and do that. So Ed then set up Element with Andrew, and I sort of became a freelance writer director.
Would it always have been like the aim is to do features? Would you have taken much commercial work among the years?
We had some bread and butter stuff. We had a contract with Temple Bar Properties to film the whole development of Temple Bar Properties, and that kind of kept us going for the beginning of Temple Films. And that's kind of, I mean, I'd never done any directing before, so that was a bit of directing that I was doing just to get started. And then I started making but I didn't do commercials. I stupidly never got into the commercials world because I was always broke, and I wouldn't have been if I'd been making commercials. And obviously another good friend of mine, Lenny Abramson, went the commercials route and did really well in commercials, and that brought him into features. I just kind of went straight into features, and then, you know, I also didn't do any TV drama. I just kind of focused on the bread and butter stuff and trying to make feature films.
The types of stories that you wanted to tell, what in general are the themes that you like? What are the things that you are exploring in your work?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think that's changed quite a lot. At the beginning, you know, Sweetie Barrett is although it's got humor in it, it's got a tragedy at the center of it. It has a sort of magic realist ending when Brendan Gleeson's character sort of blows up a whole town almost. So I was dabbling more with serious stuff that I was interested in. And then I did a mad film with Ed and Andrew, actually, called Boyd's Girl in 2004. So I was dabbling with comedy there, obviously. And then I wrote another film called Wayfaring Strangers, which was a very unfortunate experience because it fell apart. I was shooting in France with Cillian Murphy in the lead, and it fell apart on the last day of pre-production for all kinds of complicated, boring reasons.
No, none of it is boring. But like that's so close to the finish line.
I mean, I think I'm in the Guinness Book of Records for that. But it was hell at the time, and the only reason I escaped from the depression of that was that I had already written Noble, and I had already financed Noble myself. I was producing it as well as writing and directing it. And that became because my wife, Deirdre O'Kane, you know, became obsessed with Christina Noble and wanted to make that film. So that was the reason I made that film, was that I said to Deirdre on her 40th birthday, what do you want to make? and she said, I want to make Noble. So we then bought the rights of the book from Christina Noble, her books, and I started writing it. But that kind of saved me from the loss of Wayfaring Strangers.
But tell me about that. That's very like it's just so close to the finish line for something to
Yeah.
go under.
It was a psychological thriller set in the Second World War, and Killian had just had his hair cut in a short back and sides, and I'd just been out in the field doing explosion tests, and the whole crew was there, the cast was there, and everything. So it was like my designer Mark Garrity said to me, this is going to feel like a death. You're going to have to mourn this because you have the film in your head and you never get to put it on film. But as I say, I did jump up from that. I was lucky, and within a year, I was recceing with a cinematographer in Saigon to shoot Noble.
And that's a quick turnaround as well to get the next one up.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I had it financed already and pretty much written, so I was lucky with that. And then comes a big change because obviously in recent times, I've been doing much lighter stuff. I did the Deirdre O'Kane show for Sky. I did Last One Laughing for Amazon. And now I've done the comedy Fran the Man. And that has come out of the fact that I got very ill straight after the distribution of Noble. I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And fortunately, I had just come back to Ireland. We'd been living in London for 10 years. And I came back here and I got the most incredible treatment over the last 9 years. But that took about 3 or 4 years of work away from me at the beginning because I was very ill and I had lots of surgery. I actually wrote a book about it. It's called Shooting and Cutting, A Survivor's Guide to Filmmaking and Other Diseases.
I'll put that link in.
It's got lots. You can get it on Amazon. It's got lots of jokes in it, fortunately. But so the book cuts between my treatment for cancer, lots of operations and chemotherapy and immunotherapy and all radiation, etc., over 9 years. Although I published the book 5 years ago, so that's the good news. So not all the treatment is in there. And the book kind of alternates between my treatment for cancer and a kind of history of my not very salubrious film and television career. And it's got lots of jokes in it, so nobody should be put off by the subject matter. So that kind of took 3 or 4 years out of my career, and I then had to restart in terms of development. I started developing new stuff, and that takes a long time, as you know, development hell. And then fortunately, I started getting back into those TV productions with Kite Entertainment, who are a fantastic production company and have been very good to me. And now I'm kind of at full speed again, and I had an operation straight after the shoot of Fran the Man, but that was successful, and I'm all clear now. And I'm planning the next film with Collie, which is another comedy. So this is a long answer, a long way around to say that I'm kind of really committed to comedy now, and that's what really interests me. I mean, if a great drama comes along, obviously I'd love to do it. But in terms of what I'm developing, I've got another film called The Safe, written by a writer called Owen O'Neill, who lives in London. And that script is ready to go. And that's another comedy. It's a bit darker than the others. But again, I think that's where I sit now. I sit in the world of wanting to make comedy films. And Fran the Man, obviously, which we'll come to, is very much a comedy film. And that has been an absolute joy to make.
And tell me about the journey of that. When did the idea come to?
So Fran Costello, the main character, was in a television series 15 years ago, written and directed by Richie Conroy, who also wrote the screenplay for this movie. So really, it's Richie's baby. The whole thing is, and he's very generously allowed me to make the film. So what happened was, Collie McCarthy, the producer, who I knew a little bit from meeting up in London when I lived there, out of the blue, he sent me the script in the second lockdown. So that was 2021, was it? And then we went through, Screen Ireland got very keen on it, but we had to go through a series of script developments, as you do, as you know. And then we shot it in March 2024. But it sort of came to me out of the blue as a lovely present. And then the production had a few wobbles, not as bad as Wayfaring Strangers, but it had echoes of that. But once we actually got the film going, we just had this amazing cast and crew, and it's been a fantastic experience, and I just can't wait for audiences to see it, because with a comedy, That's what you need. You need an audience much more than any other genre, I think.
And in terms of script development, would you have like was it fully there or when you got development funding, was it like really to finance it, or would you come on and sort of give your thoughts and feelings on it at a certain point?
Yeah, I mean, Collie and Richie had done, I think, maybe 4 or 5 drafts by the time I got involved. So after I got involved, there were maybe another 2 or 3 drafts to go. And yes, I would have input, and Collie would have input, and Screen Ireland would have input. Um, the normal process. And that period definitely improved the script. And then we had a financial wobble. We lost about 40% of our money with I think about 6 or 8 weeks to go.
Oh my
And
God.
myself and Richie and Collie came up with this idea, which was a big alteration to the script, and no spoilers here. And we did that, and that allowed us to shoot the film without, halting, without postponing it. And actually, in retrospect, I think that idea made the film better. So those things quite often happen. Yeah.
So yourself and Screen Ireland would be delivering notes. They'd be working on it in the background. You had to come up with kind of clever fixes to work around thing. But did anything ever change from the draft that you got to the final shooting script outside of those constraints?
No, but it changed quite a bit. One of the things, and I should at this point mention Darragh Humphreys, obviously, who plays Fran and is the center of this project. But one of the things was we were, while I was following Richie's lead from the TV show in terms of tone, we had to walk a very fine line between what was the right side of the comedy and what wasn't, and what was real, and what was trying too hard. And I think some of that draft that I first read was trying a bit too hard in story terms and needed to veer less away from the sort of farcical to the more real. And I think as a tone, that's what Richie achieved through those drafts. And that was kind of our rule for shooting the film with the actors, was to play everything really straight and really real, even more than some of the famous mockumentaries. Veering away from the American mockumentaries, which are brilliant, but I feel, and even Taika Waititi's his original mockumentary, I think they kind of sometimes are straining a bit more for laughs than we were. We were following much more in the zone of Paths to Freedom, say, and the original Fran TV series.
When you got that first draft, are you sort of finding that tone? Is that something as well when you're casting and workshopping with actors that you're finessing? Because it's funny, sometimes people will see stuff on a script and they'll lean into the overtly over the top things. And while it reads funny in the moment, yeah, like it's hard to connect with it because it isn't true.
Yeah, no, the script, as I say, the script was brilliant. So Richie's a great writer. So it was mostly absolutely on the right side of the line. And then we had the freedom, Richie would be on the set a lot. So I'd have the freedom to change things with him and alter stuff myself. And, he was never precious about it. But once the actors had bought into the fact that we had to play it straight, then the comedy really worked. And also it's a story that's not just about comedy. I mean, it's got the whodunit, and it's got a love story, and it's got an emotional ending to it. So it's got all these layers that Richie has put into it.
And people are so into football. Like they're, was there any kind of militant people that they're like, oh, that would never, like how has that crowd been?
Yeah, I mean, Richie's very connected to the world of football and FAI and local football clubs, and he trains a local football club. So that they were always really supportive, and Joey's the club in Sallynoggin where we shot, that we call it St. Peter's, our fictional club. They were fantastically supportive, and in a lot of ways, the football people all know about Fran from the TV series. So I never really worried about the football because Richie helped me with all of that. And actually, the film doesn't have much football in it anyway. It's not really about football. It's about a character who's an assistant manager at a football club. But the story goes to so many other places that the football crowd, yes, hopefully they'll come and see the film. But interestingly, we did Screen Ireland do these kind of professionally run test screenings halfway through the edit. And we had about 100 people at that, and there were more women than men. And lots of the notes afterwards said, "Oh, I don't know anything about football. I'm not interested in football, but I loved the film and I loved the fact that you put the detectives in at the start, so I could really follow that story."
And in terms of casting and like finding the chemistry and that, and again, like the tone and the earnestness, was that something that was easy to do? Was that something that it was hard to find, characters that had the essence of who was on the page, or did you know it from the get-go?
Yeah, well, actually, Ardal O'Hanlon came on really early. Like when I first read the script, I rang him up because I know him a bit, and I said, and he loves football, so he came on board 2 years before we started shooting, at least. And then after that, Amy Rowan came on as casting director, and she was great and led us towards all those younger actors, particularly. And we were delving into the stand-up comedy world a bit. And obviously, my wife Deirdre O'Kane is in there. And actually, Richie said that he had written that part for Deirdre even before I came on board. So that was kind of, as long as Deirdre agreed to do it, that was kind of a done deal from the beginning. And then the other person that I was very keen to get on board and who I think is amazing in the film was Amy Huberman. And I had just done Last One Laughing, the Graham Norton hosted thing that we did for Amazon, and Amy was one of the participants in that, and she was so brilliant in it. And she's just got such range as an actor that I think that we often don't see, because she as she admits herself, she gets a little bit typecast as something quite close to herself. Whereas Jackie Charlton is very different from that, and comes from a very different background and has had a very different life experience. And Amy loved delving into that. So she came, she was the first person I went to as well, at the start of the acting process. And the rest of it was done pretty much either through offers or through auditions for some of the younger or less tested actors. And obviously Amy Rowan found Darren Dixon for us, who I think is going to be a big star. And that was to find him. He plays Amy's son, Amy's character's son, Bobby Charlton. And he's just brilliant. So to find him was probably the trickiest bit. And once we got somebody as brilliant as him, a lot of it clicked around him. And then the other people that I wanted were Risteárd Cooper and Toni O'Rourke, who play the detectives. So they were just straight offers, which was great.
As you were kind of going through the development stage, and then I'd say losing that money kind of puts a big dampener in it. Were there any other things that cropped up or changed or had to change? Was there anything that was maybe surprising?
We were very lucky we shot for 17 days in March, and it was the wettest March for 40 years. And we were so lucky we didn't get a drop of rain on us when we were shooting outside. It was ridiculous. And we couldn't actually say it to each other because in case we jinxed it.
Yeah.
And there was one time we were doing a night scene and we were lighting and it was lashing rain. But as soon as the actors came on the set, the rain stopped and we just had a lovely wet down of all the city lights. But so we were lucky with that. Other than that, to be honest with you, in a complete reverse of what happened to me in France, this went like a dream. And all the cast and crew, they all stuck in, even though they all had to take pay cuts because money fell out and whatever. They were just brilliant. And that energy, when you're going so fast, shooting in 17 days, that energy just sticks to the screen. All of the energy they poured at it is just up there on screen. And we had no hiccups, so we were blessed.
And did that continue into the post then? Like what was it like the first time you saw that rough cut?
Well, apart from the fact that the day after the wrap party, I had to tell my producer I was going in hospital for an operation. And I was in hospital. I did 17 days shooting and then 17 days in hospital. And in hospital, I had all the rushes and I was off my head on morphine. So I was sending the editor mad notes, kind of in capital letters. And so when I got back into the edit, he was teasing me by holding up these notes that he'd printed out because they were so bonkers. But actually, having shot Fran really helped me get through that operation and back into, all I wanted to do was get it back into the edit suite. And I was editing in Outer Limits in Dún Laoghaire, which is just down the road from my house, which was fantastic. And Stevie Vickers, who edited the film, had also edited with me on Last One Laughing. And he's just apart from being a brilliant editor with a lot of experience, he's just got this incredible comic timing. And that's really hard with an editor. I've in the past, I've worked with editors who just didn't quite have the comedy bones. And then you're a bit stuffed and you have to start editing by number and sort of sitting with them and go frame by frame. Whereas Stevie, just has just a comic timing like no other, I think. And I'm planning to work with him again.
Your experience on the edit, so would you go hand it off and then get that kind of complete rough cut? When do you kind of sit next to Stevie and start finessing?
So I was lucky in that I got to see, seeing the first assembly is always a dreadful time for everyone involved because it's such a mess. And it's, the editor does their job, which is to put it scene by scene as it is in the script, which is never how the film is going to end up. So I had seen that assembly before I went into hospital, hence all the mad notes I was sending. And then I think I got probably 4 weeks in the edit after that to do a sort of first director's cut before I showed it to Collie and Richie. And it was very much the three of us kind of in the editing battle. And it's always a battle, particularly, with the writer and a good creative producer. It's a very robust conversation, which is great. And because the three of us got on so well, and with Stevie, the editor, it was really creative. And then there was another thing, which was I suppose I have enough experience now to not to be worried by the edit and to throw stuff around. And because you're editing digitally, it's so easy now to go, let's take that scene and put it here. And what does that do to it? And, we really threw the script. Well, we threw the script out the window, as you always do in an edit, because the editor is always saying to you, I know you think that scene does that, but actually when I saw it, it didn't do that, and he's not stuck to the script like I am. So we really threw it around, and we got it really tight, and we got the comedy really good, and the performances are great. So the editing process was very creative, I would say, very robust. We fortunately, as I say, Screen Ireland funded that preview screening about, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the way through the edit. And I kind of thought I'd cracked the issues by then. And that proved to me that I had, and proved to me that we had a lot of laughs. And then I was doing another thing. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have friends like Paddy Brannock and Lenny Abramson and people like that. And they came in at various stages and gave me notes. And then I got my 16-year-old son and some of his pals to come in, and they had pizza and Cokes, and they watched a cut. So I was getting feedback from 16-year-olds who don't really know anything about the way films are put together, which is also great. So I kind of really believe in testing yourself all the way, because you learn so much, and you're never going to get it perfect. So you just have to try and get it as good as you can.
And in terms of changing the structure and things from the script, like, was there anything substantial or that moved that really changed the tone of it?
Yeah, one big thing I would say, which was, I mean, I won't tell you the big change we made in the script because that'll be a spoiler. But one thing that we did was there's a whodunit. The story is about this hapless character played by Darragh Humphreys. His name is Fran Costello, and he's an assistant manager. He's a kind of put upon assistant manager in a very small football club, and he gets involved in a match fixing investigation because there are his team, St. Peter's, have been drawn against the champions, Shamrock Rovers, and there are all these bets being put on all over the world, particularly in the Far East. So there are two detectives who come across Fran, and they decide to use him as their way into the match fixing scheme. And in the script, they came in quite late, I would say, on about page 30. And the one big change I made was when I first did my edit and watched it, I kind of went, we need those detectives to come in much earlier, because the story kicks off when they arrive and kind of say, you're our man, and they get him under the thumb. That really lifts the film, I think. So I just moved that whole storyline further forward, and that really worked.
Does the mockumentary style sort of allow for a little bit more flexibility? Like, do you know, if you're a documentary editor, you can change these things?
Yeah, I suppose it does. I mean, in a way, because you're going scene by scene, and although it's a mockumentary, it is ultimately a comedy drama, and everything affects everything else, as you know. So in a way, you're treating them kind of like drama scenes in terms of the way that you're positioning them, because the story has a logic to it that you have to follow, and all of those things. So in a way, I don't. I think the fact that it's a mockumentary helps in shooting. I don't think it makes a difference in editing.
When you put it together for that rough or for that like screening, did you have to kind of do a temporary sound mix for that as well?
Yes, I think as far as I think we did do a temporary sound mix. You're right. I mean, again, we were lucky because in Outer Limits they've got everything. They've got sound, they've got grading. Eugene McChrystal graded the film, and he's a fantastic grader. We had brilliant people in sound, and right across the board, they're just so helpful. And because it's all in house, you can say we need a temp sound mix, and they lash one out. And you know, then they did the DCP because we screened it on the big screen in Rathmines, which was the first time, obviously, we got to see it on the big screen. Which brings me to Ross O'Callaghan, who shot the film, who I first worked with 20 years ago on a documentary called Chasing the Lions in New Zealand. And Ross is just not only an incredible lighting cameraman, he's an absolute warrior. And shooting in 17 days with him doing all the operating as well. I don't think I could have done it without him, to be honest, because I think we shot something like, and I used to say we shot something like 670 setups in 17 days. And I used to say to people, and those are only the ones we know about, because Ross will be shooting stuff when you didn't know. And, you know, he does a lot of documentary. I mean, I've worked with him a lot, so we have a shorthand. So he was another kind of hero for me in terms of, as well as Andrew Hegarty, the first AD, keeping it all ticking over with this great crew. And then I was also lucky enough to have Packie Smith, who's a friend of mine, who's an amazing designer, who has worked with Christopher Nolan and has just done Cillian Murphy's last two films. And he's a mate of mine, so he said, listen, I'll do it. The budget was tiny, but I'll do it. And he and his team just brought an extra level to it in terms of design.
Then getting to sit with it with an audience. So you did your test screening, that was probably a big relief. But then where have you watched it with audiences since, and what was that like?
So we had a cast and crew in the IFI, which was fantastic. And kind of, it took me aback that people liked it so much and that we got so many laughs. Even though instinctively you know that they're there. And because I live with a stand-up comedian, I'm very tuned into the necessity to keep people laughing and have the laughs. Even though there's a lot of storytelling and drama in the film, but you can feel that you can hear a pin drop when that stuff is going on, and then you get back to the laughs. So I saw that screening, and then the only other screening I've seen was at the Dublin Film Festival, which again was great. But in a way, you can't kid yourself with those screenings, because there are lots of people there who are either involved in the film or, you know, want the best for the film because they're family and friends. So I'm really looking forward to creeping into what I hope will be a full cinema on a Saturday night, just anonymously, and hearing what a real audience thinks of it and what they're getting out of it.
Having Deirdre there, is she a free consultant on their taste is so good, and a comedy guru that can kind of cast an eye over things and be like, that needs to be funny. Tighten that up.
Yeah. I sort of didn't I wanted her to see it when it was finished. I showed her probably a couple of scenes that she was in, you know, just on my computer during the edit. But mostly I wanted her to see it finished. And actually, she and Amy Huberman didn't get to the cast and crew, so they saw it for the first time at the world premiere at the Dublin Film Festival. So that was kind of scary for them. But I think they both loved it. Yeah, no, Deirdre, I mean, obviously we talk to each other about material all the time. I talk to her about her stage material, and I tell her bits and pieces, but I try not to kind of overdo that, because I always want it to be fresh for her so she can enjoy it like an audience.
Yeah, because just to have that kind of brain around is helpful. But yeah, next on the slate, like, is it a case of you're thinking about it now that it's finally, this is out there in the world? Have you been prepping and planning things?
Yeah, I'm actually writing a screenplay myself for the first time in a long time, and that's nice. I'm not doing that with anybody. I'm not trying to get it funded at the moment, or even development funded. I'm just kind of doing that, and I'll shove it in a bottom drawer. So I'm doing that at the moment. The safe is ready to go, but that needs cast to get it financed. And in truth, like everybody knows, there's a thing here whether Fran does really well and is going to give us a lift, in which case it'll lift all the other projects. or if it only hits a middle road, as some of my other films have, you don't sort of get that lift. But so I'm touching wood here on that. And then Collie McCarthy, the producer of Fran the Man, through his company 40 Foot Pictures, we have been developing another screenplay with a brilliant writer from Achill called Colm Cafferty. It's his first screenplay. He did an RTÉ Storyland, and he's done lots of other writing poetry and stuff like that. But it's his first screenplay, another comedy, a cop comedy, a kind of buddy
So
comedy.
you're into your law stuff now. You're back in.
I'm into no. It's much more fun than the law. It's the proper cop end of the law. And so we're hoping to. I mean, Collie's put together a brilliant kind of pitch for that, and he's hoping to go out with that once Fran is up and running, and we're hoping to shoot that, sooner rather than later. And again, we need a bit of cast for that. I mean, cast has become so important in terms of financing films that have any budget level at all.
And I suppose then it's about timing as well. If someone is that big, where does it sit in their schedule?
It is. And so you end up trying to cast somebody who's got that clout, and then you've got to go with their schedule. They're not going with your schedule. You've got to fit in with their availability. So that means, I think we said, let's be realistic about this and give ourselves time to do both the prep on it and the casting. So we're probably thinking, this time next year. But if we got it cast sooner, we'd go sooner.
And when you're saying casting, is it very much so, okay, we want to lean into the comedy, we want someone who's gonna like look fabulous on a poster, you want something that captures the essence? Like, what would be sort of things, I know like you probably go, this is what the character is like, but maybe that person isn't fine. Like, are there all these kind of weird things you have to consider when you're putting something like that there?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as a director, you'd like to cast the actors that you see in the roles, even if they're unknown. But that's not realistic when you're working with a budget that's, several millions. It's just not realistic. So you get into this sometimes weird conversation, and it's kind of the very crass end of the film business. And when I first went to Cannes to the Cannes Film Festival a long time ago, to go and hustle with Ed and try and finance films and all of that stuff, there used to be a document called Star Power, and it was a list of, say, 300 actors, and it was the rating of how valuable they were for pre-sales, for sales agents.
That would be horrible for the actor.
So it's literally like a cattle market. And although they've stopped printing Star Power, it still exists in the ether. It's still a conversation with sales agents. Well, if you were able to get that person, that'll really help us sell the film. And this other person won't really help us at all, even though they're a great actor. So it's a totally parallel conversation, and it's not the conversation you really want to be having. You want to be having the conversation about great actors. I mean, in truth, they're all great actors anyway. So it's just levels of financiability. And it is an incredibly crass part of the film business, and it probably isn't talked about that much outside of producers' circle. But definitely as a director, that's a conversation you're having with your producer.
God, because again, like you don't always control what you get to pick. Do you know? Like you have to be picked, and then like literally have
You
that
mean
like you're
as an actor?
yeah, and then to just
an actor,
literally
no,
be like,
I
oh no,
think,
you're only 42. If you were 37, you'd get.
yeah, and now you're into, and how many Instagram followers do you have? And I always think like acting is incredibly tough. And my daughter, who's 20, is at drama school in London, and we always try and keep the business real for her, and she's seen our struggles, but she's so committed to wanting to be an actor that's fine as long as she knows those tough bits. That's fine. But I always think that I love actors. I love working with actors, and there's so many brilliant ones. Some of whom who don't get the breaks. And I always think there's a part that's coming down the track for you. And it's literally a sort of fate. And I mean, for example, I cast Sarah Green in Noble because she was such a great match for Deirdre O'Kane. And Sarah hadn't really done that much before. She'd had a small part in The Guard, I think, and I saw her blowing the Abbey away in a This Is Pop Baby show. which was what made me want to cast her. And then, so that part was kind of coming down the tracks for Sarah Greene because I was making Noble and because she looked so like Deirdre and because she's a fantastic actress and because she looked really young, even though she was in her mid-20s, she was playing 16 and she could play 16. And all of those factors. And, I'm not taking the credit for Sarah Greene's career because she's amazing and she was always going to do well. But it's sometimes those things that you need to get to kick you off.
Yeah.
And I think you do need to be lucky as an actor.
God, that's so.
And I think that's why you need to be really committed to it, and you need to be happy in your skin, even if you become an actor who's working every now and then, doing really good theatre work and the odd bit of TV and film. You sort of need to be happy with that and not disappointed that the big one hasn't come down for you. And I think that's really hard.
Yeah, like, and you do feel it as a writer, but like, it's not you, like it's a script, it's a page, it's a couple of pages, and you can always do another one. It's sort of not people just going, not you, like not this script,
no,
like which over here.
No, the rejection is so personal. As an actor, if you're being rejected, which you are constantly.
So yeah, but hats go off because it's just that, like, even hearing it in that way is sort of very jarring. You can't imagine. But I mean, also in terms of picking who you want to be on your film and getting to make those choices, would you ever feel something might be compromised if someone's pushing like a person on you that you're like, that they're not right?
No, well, you can't make that compromise because there's no point in making a bad, that will ruin the film.
Yeah.
So there's no point in ruining the film. It's got to be the right actor with the right sales agent response if you're talking about stars to deliver. And we're lucky in Ireland because we have a lot of financing through Screen Ireland and Section 481 and the BAI, and we're sometimes I think we don't realize how lucky we are, even though it's very difficult to access that money because there's so much competition. But we're lucky because we can make films so that you can finance almost a €2 million film here out of Irish money, pretty much, which is a lot, and you can do a lot with that. But if you want to go over that, if you've got expensive sequences, if you've got car chases and this and that and the other, you need more money, and therefore you have to look to international co-production, and that's the difficult bit. But the other thing about actors is they can also be incredibly generous. Like Eddie Marzan flew over to Dublin for a few hours to do a cameo in Fran the Man. And he's a friend of mine, and he's such a great guy. He'd do anything for you. And he did for me. So that's just kind of an incredibly generous thing that he did for the film. And so you get actors who have clout who, will give it back as well. And he did a Q&A at the Dublin Film Festival. And there were some young actors in the audience, and he knew of a couple of them because I'd introduced him. And he said, yes, you do have to get ready for that rejection. Get ready for rejection, rejection, and rejection, and rejection. But, stay true to yourself. And if you work hard, you'll break through. And you have to think that way. You've got to be optimistic.
Are you ever kind of hedging your bets and go, okay, well, I'm just going to start prepping the next one, or do you have the headspace for that? Are you going, okay, I like a bunch of one-pagers, I have a bunch of ideas, I've these, and this is the slate, this is just the one that's here now? Or is it a case of, this is it, I have no brain space to concentrate for anything else?
No, I mean, I did start working on the development of Scariff City, which is the working title of the Colin Cafferty's script. And we started working on that when I was editing Fran the Man. So the great John Boorman would always have said, you need to be on your next project when the last one comes out. And there's a lot to be said to that, or for that, but it's kind of impossible because it's so difficult to finance things. I'd love to be in prep now on another film, but that's not going to happen, which is why I'm writing a screenplay. So I am doing something else and I've got to focus. And I'm also lucky because I get to do bits of television work with Kite Entertainment and a couple of other companies. And, possibly I would do a TV drama job on the back of Fran if Fran does well, just to fill up this year before the next film goes. So I think it's like you need to have several horses. And I write about the horses that I'm trying to get back into development in my book. I write about what the projects I'm starting, because I had to start from scratch because my work life had completely disappeared for years. So I think that's it. You've got to have several different horses and then decide which one's next,
And you kind of said that, yes, this is like, I know comedy is there for, do you think that's like a permanent shift? Do you think this is what you're just moving towards now?
Yeah, I mean, comedy, the reason I want to do comedy is because I've been through a lot of darkness recently and I find the dark stuff difficult. I couldn't watch Succession, for example. I might try and give it another go because I know it's meant to be amazing. But when I started watching, it was just too dark for me. And also, to be honest with you, I've always, I've been with Deirdre for 30 years, so I know loads of comedians and I've been in the comedy world for all that time. And comedy is something that I'm really interested in and that actually comes quite naturally to me in terms of directing it and editing it. And I think at the moment it's a really good space to be in. I think the marketplace, and back to sales agents, they're all looking for comedies. They don't want dark, gloomy social reality at the moment. I mean, of course they do. There has to be a range of stuff, and fans of that material will always want that material. But in general, just the mood of the market is we'd love some comedies. And I actually saw a headline in Screen International the other day from an interview with a sales agent, a big headline saying, we just want to find a comedy. So I think it's a good time for comedy and it's good for my headspace and I really enjoy it. And comic actors are just, to watch them being funny is just a joy.
Hopefully you'll have lots of bums in seats when you get to sneak in.
Yeah, hopefully. And Darragh Humphreys is just so amazing in the part. When we did the professional screenings here and in London, to the question, who's your favorite character, 100% of people said Fran, which is a huge compliment to him, being surrounded as he is by all those great professional actors.
See, that's it. When you're an actor, those joys come. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks, Gemma. Great to talk to you.
And thank you so much for listening. So we have some excellent live events coming up. We have an exhibition in Dublin on the 17th of April and we have a live panel event in Mayo on the 10th of May. So make sure to check out filmireland.ie where you can register for either or both now.